Yeah, I think it comes down to sales is hard. Sales is a really tough job. There's a lot of obstacles. I subscribe to the thought that it's marketing's job to make sales easier. It'd be very difficult to succeed as a marketer if you can't empathize with the challenges that sales is dealing with. If you can't have that conversation and speak to the pains that they're facing, what are their blockers? How can you remove it? How can you empower sales to achieve higher performance? By really relating to them and understanding their world versus saying, hey, I got some spicy webinar leads. Go close them. Did you close them yet? You got some ebook downloads. High intent, right?
Last quarter I smashed my quota. Short memory, I forgot what I sold you. Sales pro wisdom like Yoda. I wonder which my prospects I should phone up.
Welcome everyone. We are back with episode 3 of Life After Sales. Today I got marketing legend and my good friend Nick Bennett, who is the... Nick, what's your role again? You have a long title for your role.
It's the Director of Field Partner and Community Marketing.
There we go. All 3 super important things in modern B2B marketing right now. Nick just out here like Thanos getting the Infinity Stones of marketing power right now. But I'm super excited to have Nick on today because Nick was actually someone I looked up to and reached out to early on in my pivot away from sales. A great mentor and guide for the sales to marketing pipeline. And, Nick is flourishing in his career as a marketer right now. So super hyped to have him on the show. We're going to be covering some of Nick's background in sales, how that correlates and translates over into marketing, what the journey looks like, some of the challenges, some of the good carryover effects. And with that being said, I'm going to pass the mic over to Nick. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, appreciate you having me, Ding. Been a huge fan of yours for a while. So yeah, I'm Nick, based in Boston. I've been doing field marketing for the last 9 years for tech companies. Gone through acquisitions, gone through an IPO. Before that, I was in sales. And funny enough, I actually went to school for sports management. So like 3 things that are not related at all, but I feel like all 3 play into who I am today.
I love that. I think sales is often a career where most people don't, when they're kids, they're like, hey, I want to grow up to be a salesperson. I think most people do end up finding themselves in sales. But look, man, I call myself the sales rapper for a reason. Sales was hugely instrumental in my career development. I saw it as a great foundation. But Nick, you brought up a great point. You were active in sports growing up. You got a degree in sports management. Looking like athletics were in your future. Now, how did you go from there to being in a sales position?
Yeah, so, it's interesting because when I got out of school, I was like, what do I do? Can I be a big shot athletic director? Or, can I be a sports agent? Turns out neither of those are true. And so I was like, all right, well, what do? I can go sell tickets for the Red Sox making $10 an hour. Or a friend of mine at the time was working as a sales manager for this industrial tooling company. And I was like, hey, man, any way you can hook me up with a job? Like, I know how to do sales, I can figure it out. And so they gave me a shot. And so I absolutely crushed it. And yeah, it wasn't like SaaS or like tech or anything. And it wasn't the sexiest of selling industrial tools to older males that would come in and like bust your balls over things. But like, I was really good at it and I kind of excelled, but it was just so boring because I kind of like just sat there from like 7 to 5 every day, Monday to Friday. And it was a small company. So, I fell on it, I guess not on purpose, but like just, had nothing else to do. And so then I stayed in sales a little bit after that at a few different companies before moving over to marketing.
So what was one thing you liked about sales and one thing you didn't like?
So the thing I liked about sales is that I was able to have some really awesome conversations with people. Like you got to know people and it wasn't just, hey, what can I do for you being an order taker? But I just enjoyed talking to people. Like even today, like I love talking to new people. Like I wouldn't say I'm an extrovert, but I think I'm still an introvert at heart, but I still enjoy coming out and like talking to people. I think that like fills up my cup, as people say, like just kind of learning from people and like hearing these stories of these older people that were like, hey, you're like a young whippersnapper, but like, it was, you did like, you do a really good job and like, your future's bright. And so that was always really nice to hear. because at the time I was only like 20, 22. It was great. But the part that I didn't like, and the part that has always, I don't want to say it's drawn me away from sales, but it's part of the reason why I haven't fully gone back to it yet, is the quota hanging over your head at the end of the day, the quarter, like people stressing out. Am I going to be able to hit this quarter? It's so true though. It's like, what are you going to do to get, to feed your family? And so, I mean, I've been offered sales roles a few times now, and being in marketing, they're like, do you want to come back to sales? And I'm just like, yeah, I know the money's good if you're crushing it, but what about those people that aren't crushing it and then you're not making money?
Yeah, I think there's a mistake that a lot of, especially I see this in newer salespeople, with a grain of salt. I'm 25, turned 26 this year. So how savvy and grizzled of a veteran am I? But oftentimes I see people basing their sales, what their vision of a sales role is going to be on the best possible scenario, right? I think oftentimes we're fed, hey, here's the OTE, and that's all we're thinking about. Okay, it's going to be peaches and rainbows, we're crushing quota, but what does the actual quota attainment look like at the org, right? And I think across the industry, it's something like, I think 60% of reps do not hit quota in SaaS right now, or I think in the wider scope of sales. So that is tough. It can be hard to detach from a sales job. And as someone who's worked in a couple of different types of roles, different departments, I think that's the biggest function of sales. It's almost akin to like an investment banking or a consulting type role where you're kind of on the clock more than, your standard 50 hours or so a week in this, but not in the sense that companies saying, hey, here's a PowerPoint at 3 a.m., please fix. It's more of a, hey, you have 3 days left to hit your quota. You can work 8 hours during the day, but you might miss your number, right? Yeah. So it's a different type of pressure. In some cases, mentally, I think it's even harder to detach from than the 80, 90, 100-hour jobs, just because it is so performance-based. And it's easy to fall into a trap of, I didn't hit this goal, so something must be wrong with me as a person, versus maybe this role wasn't a good fit. Not to blame the companies, but sometimes the comp plan, the structuring, the goals aren't realistic, right? So that's tough. Now, Nick, shifting gears to literally how you shifted gears, I know you mentioned some of the things you didn't like about sales. What initially spurred you to look into marketing to take that leap?
Yeah, I'll be 100% truthful with you. I kind of came across it by accident. The reason that happened was I was working for Motorola. And so my job, I had AT&T as an account. And so what we did, we would launch a phone every September right up against the iPhone. They would expect magic to be happen. But iPhone, like Apple and Samsung are at the top. Like no one's going to be slinging Motorola phones over like Apple. And so that was my job. So I owned the entire East Coast for AT&T indirect dealers. And so basically I had to get them to want to purchase more phones from Motorola through AT&T. And I was comped on that. And then, basically sell through was another piece, and kind of incentivizing them, running split programs, doing trainings. It was all of that. And I was like, this is really tough. I was just like, it's more B2B to C, which was kind of interesting, but sometimes it was B2C because I was dealing a lot of times with the customers and trying to get them to just swap. And I spent a lot of time in AT&T stores.
So let me make sense of this. So you were working for Motorola at the time, and then you were managing partner stores and what have you, essentially resellers. But the goal was to, once they bought, in bulk, they would then sell to their own customers, the B2B, B2C part. But it was tough because we know the market with mobile phones and, Apple, Android, and what have you. So it's really like you're a small startup SaaS. You have some partnerships with a couple of companies, but you're like the little dog in your category. Okay, gotcha. So from there, what happened?
Yeah, so there was a new role that opened up, and it was to lead channel marketing. And so I moved away from being comped on sales, and it was more solely about developing marketing programs with these indirect dealers to drive sell through. So it was more of like I was getting comps solely. It wasn't even like it was a bonus. It was base plus bonus. but it didn't matter how many phones got sold at the end of the day. I was more comped from a bonus on like company goals. And it was so much fun. Like I still had the same exact patch. I still got to travel a ton. I got to do a ton of like shows for AT&T, from Motorola. And like, it was funny because there was probably about 4 or 5 of us, and we would travel to like all of the same AT&T stores. It was like Motorola, LG, there was someone from Samsung, BlackBerry. And we used to all just chill. Like we were the crew, and like, we would just kind of like, we were all in like marketing at that point. And it was a lot of fun. And I was like, oh, channel marketing, like that's interesting. Like I've never even like thought of that before. And that allowed me to then move into another channel marketing role at a company. And that was like my first time in actual like tech. I was like, oh, this is cool. Like I'm dealing with partners that we sell through. We were 100% channel, but I'm just developing like the marketing programs for them. And then I kind of just never looked back, to be truthful with you. That was like the first company, and I was able to go from channel to field, which is really like the same exact thing. The only difference is channel marketing, you sell through the channel. Field marketing, you're dealing with the direct sales team.
Gotcha. And for the uninitiated, I know you love being asked this, Nick. What is field marketing?
So field marketing 2.0 means you are looked at as a full stack marketer. Events, yes, is part of it, but you need to understand digital. You need to understand brand, creative, content, like product marketing, like all those different pieces to ultimately drive middle and bottom of the funnel for your sales team.
We often hear that field marketing is the closest piece of marketing towards sales in a lot of cases, right? Especially working very directly with the sales team. How did your sales background help you become a better marketer, a better field marketer?
I personally think that every marketer should do sales at some point, even if it's like an SDR or like a BDR role. Like, walk in their shoes, understand the pains that they go through every single day, because that's what helped me. Like for me, I'm all about building relationships. And if I can build, like any company that I join, the very first thing I do is build relationships with sales. Like that is priority number one, because if I can do that and I'm seen as an actual like tool within their arsenal versus just another marketer jamming stuff down their throat, like when I go to ask them for something, they're going to give it back to me versus just like, hey, go push this, go do this, go run this conference, like all these things. They're going to just be like, who the hell is this guy? Like, he's not even like adding any value.
Yeah, I think it comes down to sales is hard. Sales is a really tough job. There's a lot of obstacles. I subscribe to the thought that it's marketing's job to make sales easier. It'd be very difficult to succeed as a marketer if you can't empathize with the challenges that sales is dealing with. If you can't have that conversation and speak to the pains that they're facing, what are their blockers? How can you remove it? How can you empower sales to achieve higher performance by really relating to them and understanding their world versus saying, hey, I got some spicy webinar leads. Go close them. Did you close them yet? You got some ebook downloads, high intent, right?
Don't send ebook downloads to sales.
There we go. That's the takeaway of the episode. Don't send your ebook downloads to sales in your life after sales. Awesome. So we've kind of covered how a background in sales helps you as a marketer because you've understood the challenges and struggles of sales reps and how to better relate what you do to actual impact on their day-to-day performance. Now, what are some drawbacks of sales? What habits or thought patterns did you have to unlearn when you pivoted to marketing?
Understanding that it's not just an I. And some people say this, like it's very much like a team sport in selling, like in realizing that is important. Like, yeah, you could go in and you could try to close like everything by yourself and think that you are like the end all be all of like the best salesperson out there. But if you're not team selling and if you're not utilizing other subject matter experts within the company or like leveraging your leadership team or like finance or whatever it is, like you're doing yourself a disservice. And I think that was an important thing to learn. It's like, and that's why I try to be as such like an advisor to sales as I am, because I understand that like they sometimes are in the mindset that I need to do all of this myself versus let's just do this together as one team and close deals.
That I versus we mentality. I think that's huge. This is definitely a trap that I fall into sometimes, especially now I'm more on the agency owner side. is there are a lot of things and processes and systems that it would be good to have standard operating procedures. It'd be good to have the mind share so that information or best practices don't get siloed. And I think a lot of reps fall into that trap of I'm responsible for my quota. Interacting with anyone else in the company is not going to help my quota. But I think that's a very limiting mind space to be in. Some of the best conversations, the most fruitful professional just actions that I've done, we're talking to people from other departments, learning the ins and outs of the product and the industry. You know, oftentimes people are at your company for a reason, right? They got hired for a reason because they know the space, they have value that they bring to the table. Another quick pivot, Nick. So you've been successful in your past life as a salesperson. You've been able to leverage that into a fruitful marketing career, innovating and trailblazing in the field marketing community partnership space. And I also see you building externally outside of that as well, right? Nick, you're a huge proponent of personal branding. And now I see you step into the journey, becoming a digital creator, making a ton of valuable e-courses, starting a podcast. So I'm curious, what prompted you to go explore these avenues? And two, I'm curious if sales and your background in sales had any positive effect on your ability to go out and succeed.
Yeah, I think talking to Justin Welsh, like really like pushed me over. And like, he's someone that's such like a great digital creator. He talks about solopreneurship and like things like that. But like just like kind of like running things by him. And I was just like, he was like, you like understand this space really well. Like you should do something with it. And for me, I was just giving everything away for free for almost the last 2 years. And I was just like, you know what? Like, I'm not looking to get rich by any means off of any of this. I'm trying to add additional resources that I think could benefit people. And that's really what it was. Like, it's low cost stuff, but my goal is really to get people to want to just like learn and kind of take those back and start additional conversations. Who knows? Maybe it leads to consulting down the road. Maybe, and it already has in some cases on this ABM playbook that I have. It's like I've already had someone that signed up for like a year of consulting with me for like wanting to learn more about ABM. And it's been really great. And I've got like a couple new things coming out soon, but it isn't about the money as much for me as it is about like developing the relationships. And then like when I need a favor returned, coming back and like getting those.
Certainly. I think there's even beyond that, right? Just having the impact. Nick, you certainly built up your name over the past 2 years, just being there, showing up consistently, freely giving away knowledge and bring value to people without any expectation of return. And then now that you are launching these initiatives to what it really is, I see is you're helping more people at scale, more so than you would, because you only have 24 hours a day. You can only do so many Zoom networking calls. You have a job, you got a family to also balance. So when you have these digital assets that are delivering a lot of educational content, like your ABM course, for example, or bringing together a community of like-minded people. So not only are you giving value and helping, the people that are in your community are also helping each other and growing that reach as it goes. So what I really see is you're concentrating and scaling the impact. You're going deeper and wider with this new venture. So that's something that's super exciting. You brought up an interesting point about the consulting piece, how some of this free value stuff and then productizing it into, let's say, a digital course has led to consulting. Walk us through a bit more of what that looks like and what do you think the rationale behind it is?
Yeah, it's funny because I do a terrible job about like with this right now. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. I posted today about like where like profile views and how profile views have driven inbound. And I was like, if you want to up your LinkedIn game, like shoot me a DM. I can take on like a few clients. I didn't think anyone would actually DM me. Turns out I got like 15 DMs within like 2 hours, and they were like, what do you charge? And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, this is like new. I'm just, I have no clue. Like, what are you looking for? And like, I don't have like like, all right, you're going to get X for Y, which I need to really like figure that piece out. The ABM piece is a little bit easier for me because I know, like, for example, I'm giving like a 1 hour meeting with me on a regular basis. And we're deep diving into your actual ABM plan where I'm kind of breaking down or asking questions or having you think about it a different way. That's a lot easier. When I get into like the LinkedIn piece of it, where people are like, what can you help me with LinkedIn? I'm like, well, I don't know. Like I can help you with everything. Do you want content ideas? Do you want strategy framework? And they're like, well, do you have like a packages list? And I'm like, no, like I don't know. I'm just making this up as I go. And that's the piece that like, I'm struggling with that I need to kind of like figure out because people are interested. I just don't know how to properly like package it together.
Certainly. So I think I could probably speak to a bit of that myself, just having gone through that journey. But first, I want to recognize, celebrate one thing, Nick. You mentioned that you're going through this process, you're figuring this out, but you also mentioned you made a post on LinkedIn, hey, hit me up for some tips, and you had a numerous amount of people reach out, right? And I will say to your credit, that's because of the brand and the credibility that you've built up over this amount of time. And I would say to the listener, if you're just starting out on this side of the journey, your personal brand, maybe startup consulting, something on the side, most likely you're not going to get that type of response early on. You know, Nick has been putting in the work for a long time, not just on LinkedIn, not just building in public, but even before then as a marketer, as a salesperson, gaining the experience to have the credentials to be able to speak from that point. So you laid a lot of groundwork down. What happened for me was early on, it was very similar to a lot of these conversations. So a lot of people say, hey, productize early, standardize your offerings. I actually disagree with that slightly. That's a very good advice if you're more of a B2C coach type of person, right? But knowing you, Nick, and we're in the B2B space, and what does that mean is typically we're selling to organizations, not necessarily individuals. And it becomes tough when you make that assumption too early and you standardize your offerings based on limited information or sample size. And you might end up optimizing for individual buyers. But in reality, if you're tying your offering to a business problem, a B2B type of pain point, I think you're going to find there's more universal appeal, and you can kind of scale your packages along with the size of the end company, right? Which is kind of the goal in B2B. It's like if we just wanted to sell high ticket to solo people, we wouldn't be in this space. I know we're coming up on the time here. Nick, do you have any final thoughts?
My final thoughts, just kind of, don't be afraid to try. Like that's all it was for me. Like, I don't know, I'm figuring this out as I go. Like, I asked Ding a million questions and he's been super helpful to me from like the consulting side of it. But like, I wing everything in my life. Like, I don't have a plan. Like, I don't even know like what I'm doing next week, to be truthful with you. Like, I'm just kind of like figuring this out as I go. And I feel like that's the beauty of it. And that's something that like really opens up a lot of eyes when you can say like, all right, I'm just figuring this out as I go. Like, I don't have a set plan or goal. Like, I'm constantly like innovating.
That's a really good mindset to be in. And I think to tie it back to life after sales, right? As an IC in sales, you often got to think quickly on your feet. You got to pivot. Hey, this plan isn't working, or they just changed my selling rules, or I got a new territory now. These accounts are not in my name, right? So you're constantly adapting and shifting to changing circumstances while maintaining that internal locus of motivation, holding yourself accountable, having the ownership and responsibility of your outcomes, regardless of what goes on. And I definitely see that in you day to day, adapting, adjusting, always integrating new ideas, new concepts, new methodologies into your process. Huge fan of yours, Nick. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. Where can we find more of your content, more of your stuff? What are you building these days?
Yeah, honestly, everything I put is on LinkedIn. So find me there, and that's where I'm kind of linking out. You'll find my link tree if you want to find all my resources that I've kind of compiled. I'm always adding new stuff, so you'll see that in my my LinkedIn bio.
Amazing. Be sure to check out Nick's podcast, Rep Your Brand. I was featured on an episode a while ago. One of the best podcasts in the marketing space, B2B space, about how to create and leverage a personal brand to level up in your career. Check out Revenue Era, the newest and greatest community of revenue marketers. I'm gonna pass the mic over to Nick real quick as we hit this outro. What is Revenue Era? What is it for, and how can we join?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's for revenue marketers that are looking to level up their career. It's a place, there's a free job board, there's a Slack community. And if you follow Revenue Era on LinkedIn, you'll see the application form. It's a free community, but we don't want to get it flooded too quickly. So we are gating it just to kind of like slow it down a little bit. So we ask that you just fill out the application and we'll start to let people in over time.
Ooh, my man Nick brought up the G word, the gate word. That's a whole other episode in itself. Well, thank you so much, man. Check out Revenue Era. Check out Rep Your Brand. Big shout out to Nick. Shout out to Alice. Shout out to all the good stuff that is happening on LinkedIn and LinkedIn land. And this has been an episode of Life After Sales.